Now more than ever before, we are relying on the internet to keep up with the news, stay in touch with friends, shop, and everything in between. That's why it's so important that you reserve your first and last name .vote web address for your upcoming campaign. Secure your digital real estate by owning your name with a .vote. Your name, your campaign, your very own .vote domain. Head to GoDaddy today.
You are jamming out with Breaking Battlegrounds. Some new music, because apparently we got in copyright trouble. Uh-oh, Chuck.
We got the former AG on the phone. Future AG.
Future AG. So this is the man who's going to be prosecuting us very shortly here.
So we're just taking this off his future docket. How are you, Abe?
I'm doing great. Yep, I'm going to prosecute you guys for calling me a former AG already.
Well, hey, we're trying to put you in the private sector to make more money. See, we're thinking ahead for you, Abe.
Right. We've got your career path all mapped out. So, folks,
yeah. Well, guys, it's great to be on because you were also my first radio interview I ever did when I first announced the campaign.
Really?
Yes, that's right.
Wow. I didn't know that.
So all the goodwill, all the training came from us, is what you're saying.
Actually, I remember Sam Stone saying, "Abe, you got to run as Honest Abe." So, we got those yard signs for you, Sam.
And those are fantastic. I love them. I have one in my window right now.
Sam will be invoicing you today for that.
Yes, absolutely. Folks, in case our offbeat intro here did not explain it, we are talking with Abe Hamadeh. He is the Republican candidate for Attorney General for the state of Arizona. His opponent is a George Soros-funded nightmare, and we need this gentleman in office. We are so glad to have him on the line with us today. Abe, how's the campaign going?
It is so energetic, Sam and Chuck. I mean, right now, what we're doing in Arizona, the rest of the country is really watching. And, they're so amazed that all of the nominees are working together. I mean, you have me, Kerry, Blake, Mark Finch. We're all promoting each other everywhere we're going. We're going to each other's events. We see this as a movement right now, and it's really unlike anything we've ever seen before, especially in politics. So on my end, it's going really well. I mean, I have an update for you all, but the Democratic Attorney General Association, they withdrew all of their money from my opponent. So they actually withdrew about $2 million.
Really? Wow.
Yeah,
that's a big deal.
It's a huge deal because, and of course, the media doesn't write about this, right?
No.
Because the media wants to talk about any time that Mitch McConnell does something, on a Senate side. But as soon as it affects the Democrats, they just keep quiet. So I'm lucky to have you guys on where I can announce these things. But the Republican Attorney General Association, they actually invested $3 million into my race. So just look at the difference right there. They're abandoning my opponent, and the Republicans are coming in because they understand how important this role is, and I'm a great candidate, and it's really evident on that debate stage the other week where it was what a complete failure for I wasn't just debating my opponent, I was debating all three. I was debating the two moderators.
Yeah, I was going to say that was 3-on-1. That debate was 3-on-1. The two moderators for PBS plus your opponent going after you.
Well, yeah, one of them was from the Arizona Republic, and she failed to disclose that my opponent used to work at the Arizona Republic and was accused of insider trading at the time, was kicked off the campaign bus by John McCain, out of all people. John McCain did not like my opponent being there because that's how dishonest he thought of her. So, it was, and I had a smile on my face the whole time. I'm a happy warrior. I kind of have to laugh at the media. I mean, their gaslighting is so... It's hilarious, but it's also sad at the same time. But I think their influence is waning very rapidly.
So let's talk about the border. Tell me the difference, or tell our listeners, what is the difference between you and your opponent regarding border enforcement, and what can the AG do to help tighten up that border, which is just an open sieve right now?
Well, it's a great question, Chuck. So, the difference between my opponent and myself on it is she does not talk about the border. She refuses to acknowledge what's going on at the border. She just has her eyes closed. And for me, I've gone to the border multiple times right now, and my biggest thing, first of all, is even current Attorney General Brnovich, he has said what's going down at the border is an invasion. And when Carrie Lake takes office, I'm going to work with her on that invasion declaration. But something that I've been calling for the past year that I've been running is that I want to label the drug cartels as terrorist organizations, Chuck. And with that designation, there's actually going to be an enhanced sentencing on them. And under current Arizona law, we use the U.S. Department of State's definition of what a terrorist is. And unfortunately, the U.S. Department of State has been politicized. When I was in the military overseas last year in Saudi Arabia, we were actually getting missiles fired on us from the Yemen Houthi rebels. And they were terrorist organizations, but they were just delisted by the Joe Biden administration as terrorists, which is another reason why the Saudis are not very happy with Joe Biden. So, my military experience, I recognize that the threat are the narco terrorists down at our southern border, the drug cartels. So with that classification of them being terrorists, enhanced sentencing is going to be a key component. So instead of just getting 5 years for smuggling drugs, they might be getting 10 or 15 years or longer. And also we could have seize their assets in creative ways as well. So that's one of the main issues I'm going to work on. But even Governor Ducey, if you just saw what he did in August, Chuck, he put those shipping containers down at our southern border. He did that without the authorization of the federal government. And I think that's what it takes right now. We have to test the limits of the federal government because they're refusing to take action. It's time for the Arizona to take matters into our own hands.
Yeah, absolutely. No question. Anytime you have an opponent right now who's not talking about the border at all, what it means is they're open borders and they just not are willing to admit it to the public because they won't get elected.
That's exactly right. And you saw some of that Katie Hobbs ad that she's down at the border. It's so laughable because they never want to talk about the fentanyl that's coming across, or if they do want to talk about it, they don't want to go to the root cause of it. The root cause of it is coming from the southern border, and there's so much complexities with the border situation. So there's the complexities of the illegal immigrants who are coming across our southern border, but also with the main drug operation from the drug cartels, which is those who are sneaking into the country, evading law enforcement, wearing those camouflage outfits to evade law enforcement. So there's so much going on. The cartels, they're actually profiting from both. If you saw the report from the Department of Homeland Security, they had $11 billion, which, by the way, I think is on the low end of things. $11 billion from the human trafficking to get them across the southern border, plus the hundreds of billions of dollars in the drugs also.
Right. $11 billion is truly, it's like an MBA getting an Excel sheet just doing a guesstimate, right? Because it's a cash business. They're not like going down to Wells Fargo and taking a loan out to pay a coyote.
Well, and I don't know if you've seen this, Abe, but there was a piece that ProPublica put out yesterday, I think it was, which really tied a Chinese businessman with deep ties to the Chinese government to the fentanyl crisis and money laundering and the trafficking. All of it. This is an international criminal conspiracy stretching across multiple continents.
Absolutely. And he's not a businessman. He's a gangster, and he's a thug. And I saw the article, and that's what's going on. The Chinese are working hand in hand with the drug cartels to subvert our safety. They're poisoning children right now. They are the ones who brought the COVID into the United States. And, Attorney General Eric Schmidt in Missouri, he actually sued the Chinese Communist Party and the Wuhan Institute of Virology. And I think there's still an ongoing lawsuit regarding that. Whether ultimately it actually goes anywhere, but at least it brings awareness to what's happening. So this is where, the Mexican government also has to get tougher. And that's why I appreciate what President Trump did in office. He got tough with Mexico. When you go down to the border, they give the Mexican government, they actually have pamphlets printed by the government, instructions on how to get to the United States and what to do to claim asylum. It's so criminal what's happening. So this requires, people with tough negotiation skills. And where I talk about my experience being in the U.S. Army Reserve, I was overseas in Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is a complicated country, Chuck and Sam. This is the number one purchaser of all U.S. military training and sales in the world, $130 billion. And, it's not like negotiating with Iraqis or Afghans. You're not dictating terms to them. You're actually negotiating. Look at Joe Biden right now. He's done a terrible job at negotiating with Saudi Arabia. You saw that Saudi Arabia basically had to publicly rebuke him just this week about him trying to postpone those oil cuts until after the election.
Well, and then Biden immediately threatened them with a change in the U.S. relationship. He's literally putting national security behind his own electoral interests. Abe, I want to move on real quick because we only have about 3 minutes left here. I want to move on real quick and talk about law and order and courtroom experience, because you've been in a courtroom. Has your opponent ever been in a courtroom? She's
never practiced law. I can't get over how, the Democrats, they don't have primaries. And, I ran up against some really tough opponents who are really well qualified. And, I learned a lot from them on the trail, right? I mean, you're debating with them, you're talking to them, and you bounce ideas from some of these debates. And with her, she has never practiced law. She is an environmentalist professor at ASU, and she's a former journalist in a corporation commission. But she has never been in the courtroom. I've prosecuted dozens of trials. I've served my country honorably overseas, and that's what's so offensive is she keeps saying that that we're the threat to democracy. And I keep telling her, listen, Chris, democracy is going to defeat you on November 8th. And I would hope she does the right thing and concede that election when it's such an overwhelming support for myself and the entire Republican ticket. But it is.
When you were defending our country, she was lying to the people of Arizona, pretending she was a Republican to get elected to the CorpCom.
Well, she it's so foolish. She stands for nothing, Sam, and I think the voters understand that. But certainly law enforcement does. That's why I've been endorsed by every single law enforcement organization in the state, because law enforcement no longer trusts the Democratic Party to have their interests. When they were legitimately calling to defund the police and abolish ICE, we cannot forget that's what they were calling for. They're the ones still calling to end cash bail and releasing criminals back on our streets. We got to get back to the basics. All we're calling for is sort of common sense, conservative ideas, which is safety, prosperity, and making sure Arizona is free.
And a lot of the attacks on you are being funded through George Soros, the Open Society Foundation, the people that have driven the anti-police, defund the police narrative, right?
Absolutely, and they're using the media. The media is the propaganda arm of the Democratic Party, and that's why they're so scared of Kerry Lake, myself. And, we know how to combat them. We had a press conference last month where Kerry Lake and we took the media to task when they try to call our law enforcement officers racist. It's unacceptable. And the media is particularly worried about me and, why we're leading big in the polls. We're leading really big, and that's why the Democrats had to abandon my opponent. That's the only statewide race that they abandoned. It's because they have a hard time, defining me. Right now, I'm the son of immigrants. I'm a veteran. I'm a prosecutor, and I can communicate. And I think they're deathly afraid of me.
Absolutely. Hey, before we wrap up here today, tell folks how they can follow you, follow your campaign. Hopefully, folks, if you're listening out there, you understand the stakes in Arizona right now are high. Arizona will determine a lot of what happens in this country, and we need to get these candidates, including Abe, across the line. So, Abe, tell folks how they follow you.
They can go to abeforag.com, abeforag.com, and we can use any financial help because you're right. George Soros can come in and ultimately dump millions of dollars, but we can use all the help we can get from your listeners.
Fantastic. Abe Hamadeh, candidate for Attorney General in the state of Arizona. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate it.
Welcome back to Breaking Battlegrounds. For this segment, we're going to talk about a really interesting event that's happened here in Arizona regarding Republican Kerry Lake and her Democrat opponent Katie Hobbs, who has refused to debate Kerry Lake. And this week, Sam, the Arizona Republic today had an article. They've been blasting it. Arizona PBS, ASU under fire from Kerry Lake's campaign after decision to give Katie Hobbs an interview. Take our audience, Sam, from how this all began, Katie's refusal to debate, how everybody tried everything in the world to get her to debate, and frankly, she's been a wimp about it, and there's no other way to say it. And then you had this event, and all of a sudden, Arizona PBS decided without telling anybody that they're going to give Katie airtime.
Right.
Go ahead.
Well, so as folks know, and I always disclose this, I am Kerry Lake's policy director, so obviously I have a vested stake in this. But Arizona Clean Elections Commission, we have a group that you can actually get funding for elections if you don't want to go out and raise money from from the general public. You can get $5 donations, and then you get a whole bunch of money from the state to run. But the other thing they do is that they host all the debates, the major debates on PBS between all the statewide candidates here in Arizona. The congressional, they don't do the congressional candidates, but they do all the statewide. And they've had a standing policy for the better part of 2 decades that they offer it to every candidate who's on the ballot. And then if one of the candidates refuses and the other one agrees, that candidate, and it's an hour-long debate. If one of the candidates agrees, the other one refuses, the one who agrees is given a 30-minute interview in lieu of the debate. And the candidate who ducked out of it gets nothing. And this is obviously to keep the debates going. These have been an integral part of Arizona politics.
And let me stand you that. The Clean Election Committee has bent over backwards trying to get Katie Hobbs on this debate,
Yes.
correct? I mean, it's not like they've held this very strong line in the sand. They have tried everything in the world to accommodate her, but said you have to do the debate.
Well, and it's gone so far that Kari Lake has even offered to let the Hobbs campaign write the questions. I mean,
Really?
Yeah, no, she's multiple times on air offered to let them write the questions, let them choose the moderator, name the time and the place. I mean, any of that kind of thing. And Hobbs has flat refused to debate. She will not be in the same room at the same time as Kari Lake. And whenever they actually have been, which has only been twice, Katie Hobbs has melted down and gone running. I mean, literally gone running. She did it from a chamber forum. She did it from a Hispanic chamber forum because she happened to put her eyes on Kari Lake and she couldn't handle it.
Well, so reading this article here, this is a great comment here by the Arizona Republic. One day after Lake's interview at the university-affiliated public broadcasting station was abruptly canceled, questions remained about who at Arizona PBS or the university made the controversial decision to invite Hobbs for the interview. So when did the campaign find out that all of a sudden they're going to give this time, and who do you think pushed this decision?
Well, actually, we have a pretty good knowledge. So I hadn't quite – I'm giving long stories this morning, folks. I apologize. But Kari had agreed and been given the 30 minutes. And then we heard on, I believe it was Tuesday, late in the midday, that PBS was scheduling a separate 30-minute interview with Katie Hobbs against the traditions and against the rules that they have set in place with their broadcast, with their partners at Clean Elections. And what we've learned is that decision didn't come. Obviously, Clean Elections had no idea. They found out about it when they heard about the
and they seem,
the media.
In fairness, they seem furious about
and
this.
They are, and they have responded very honorably and just said immediately, we're going to cancel tonight's thing with Kari. We're severing our relationship with PBS. We're going to find a different broadcast partner, a different venue, different moderator, all that kind of thing. We're going to give Kari her 30 minutes because she stood up here to debate. If Hobbs wants to show up, we'll still give him the hour.
Kudos to the Clean Election Commission.
They have acted honorably and with integrity throughout this entire process, and they have tried to accommodate the candidates, and they've tried to accommodate Katie Hobbs. And Katie Hobbs will not be accommodated because she's not going to be on stage with Kari Lake. She knows she's going to, Kari's going to mop the floor with her.
Right.
And this came down from ASU Cronkite School of Journalism, where this PBS station is embedded within the Cronkite School. And from what we understand, Bettino Batts Jr. Is the person who is the dean of the ASU Cronkite School and made this decision and told PBS this is what they're going to do. And then they tried to lie. They said, we offered this same 30 minutes additionally to both candidates. They did not until we blew up the issue in public. And then they claimed, we'll give you an extra 30 minutes too. That was their escape valve that they tried to. And then they're trying to claim to the press that was offered all along. Well, show us the email. Show us the phone call. Show us where you called Kari Lake's campaign, and it did not happen. So they are lying about this. The ASU School of Journalism is lying about this, which is perfect analogy for modern journalism.
Well, and they have a track record the last 2 years of being completely incompetent and dishonest over there.
This is an activist institution.
Absolutely. So what happens now?
Well, I mean, Kari has still said, and she gave them till noon today, the Hobbs campaign, to agree to a Clean Elections debate because we're running out of time.
Well, yeah. I mean,
you're
2.5 weeks.
Right. We're running out of time. And she said she will appear, on other programs, but we're not playing ball with this PBS station. We're not going to give them the ratings that Kerry Lake brings at this point, because pure and simple, Kerry Lake, this was going to get carried, if they'd had a debate for the first time in Arizona history, it was going to be carried live on every single broadcast station in Arizona.
Really? So they've not been live before?
No, all the other stations do, they cut pieces of it and run it on their news shows, but they don't actually air the live debate. They leave that just to PBS. But in this case, because Kerry Lake is such a nationally internationally interesting figure, they were going to have it. Every station in Arizona would have been carrying it live. And we went out there with Kerry. She held a press conference outside PBS. She called them out for it. And there were literally more reporters there from around the world, every major national news stations from Europe, from Australia, from Asia, were all there covering this. They were all going to come to cover this debate if it ever happened. And it was literally the most media I've ever seen in Arizona outside of the Super Bowl.
Well, I think has Katie Hobbs ever done a debate in any campaign?
Not that I'm aware of. Certainly not a real one.
I just feel that she's not intellectually capable of doing debate. I don't feel she's quick on her feet. I feel she has to be very programmed. I think she's just a younger version of Joe Biden. I don't think she comes quick on her feet. I don't think she has quick retorts. I just think she's an intellectual lightweight. And I'm really surprised with that and the racial discrimination lawsuits that she lost in court and taxpayers had a fund, that Democrats didn't run the mayor of Phoenix or Staten or anybody else. I'm really amazed they just let her have a free pass.
Well, they play musical chairs with assigned seating, and it was her turn to have that seat.
It's really incredible, and I can't believe they just didn't say, we need a better candidate. I think this would be a different race.
Well, it probably would be. I think it almost certainly would be. But Katie Hobbs, as someone said yesterday, her communication skills are somewhere between John Fetterman and Joe Biden, and at least they have excuses.
Folks, if you're not following us, go visit breakingbattlegrounds.vote. Join us on our social media. We have lots of great content always there, plus clips of the show. Feel free to share it with your friends. And we're going to be right back with Jeff Hayes, who's done a documentary on Fauci and the whole COVID mess and Fauci's little empire. We'll be back.
Welcome back to Breaking Battlegrounds with your hosts Chuck Warren and Sam Stone. Folks, are you concerned with stock market volatility, especially with Joe Biden in office? What if you could invest in a portfolio with a high fixed rate of return that's not correlated to the stock market, a portfolio where you know what each monthly statement will look like with no surprises? You can turn your monthly income on or off, compound it, whatever you choose, no loss of principal if you need your money back at any time. In today's market, Chuck, that's sounding like a better and better deal. And folks, if you're interested in that, in making sure that you protect your portfolio right now, need you to log on to investyrefi.com. That's invest, the letter Y, REFY.com, or call them at 844-204-7756. Tell them Chuck and Sam sent you. You'll be glad you did.
Well, fantastic. Well, today we have with us Jeff Hayes. I've known Jeff for 2 decades when he did one of his first documentaries, and he has come out with a new one, which we're going to play the trailer here real quick. Go ahead, Jeremy. It's called The Real Anthony Fauci.
You're really attacking not only Dr. Anthony Fauci, you're attacking science. Science has an air of authority. So people who want to push back on authority, push back on science.
Science is about constant skepticism, constant questioning, and you didn't see any of that. You saw a narrative. In a 20-month period, they obliterated all the Bill of Rights, the United States Constitution, with no objection in the American press.
Normalcy only returns when we've largely vaccinated the entire global population.
If the FDA says it's okay to take the vaccine, are you going to take it?
I'm going to look at the data upon which the FDA makes that decision.
Well, that's fantastic. Jeff, so You know, we were talking before, we have a gubernatorial campaign here in Arizona where the Democrat nominee has told people, I don't talk to people I don't know about politics. And that rang to me when we had just had the clip from Dr. Fauci saying, you know, you're not attacking Fauci, you're attacking science, right? As you've done this film, what has surprised you about it as you've made it?
Well, when I first saw Fauci, I wasn't familiar with his career, and so he appeared at Trump's side. Here's this avuncular, grandfatherly, likable, reasonable guy, and so every time I saw interviews with him, I personally liked him. And then some of the messaging started getting weird when he went from no need for masks don't help, they can actually make things worse, to all of a sudden mandatory masks. But I was really unfamiliar with him until I read Bobby Kennedy Jr.'s book, The Real Anthony Fauci. And I was stunned at what I learned from this book. I've known Bobby for years, and I've watched him just get pilloried. I mean, almost a modern-day Job, as he's been shunned from, falling from being liberal royalty to, not even be able to reach anyone by phone anymore. And this book, was a publishing phenomenon, sold 1 million copies, 17 weeks on the New York Times bestseller list, without one major media review, the most suppressed book of my lifetime. I was stunned by what I read.
All sorts of sellers were trying to block it. I mean, Amazon was trying to downgrade listings of it. And Fauci, what did you learn about his career? Because I know a little bit about it before he came. I got nervous when I saw him the first time, to be honest.
Yeah, I was really amazed at how ignorant I was, because most people, or certainly people as up to speed as you guys knew way more than I did. But in 1984, when Fauci took over the infectious disease department at the NIH, it was a small, he's just a bureaucrat. It was a small department, not a big budget. Infectious diseases were waning. And he jockeyed and manipulated to get control of the AIDS epidemic and got that moved into his department. He built a $1.7 billion budget annually and put himself in the position where he decides what gets studied and what doesn't. And his AIDS policies, in my opinion, are responsible for the deaths of hundreds of thousands of people. He's been working on a vaccine for 40 years that he told us 40 years ago would have within a year. $16 billion spent, and every year we're going to have it next year, and nobody even asked him to be accountable anymore.
Yeah, we got to go to break here in just a moment, but we're going to bring back Jeff Hayes here for our final segment. Folks, if you're not familiar with this, I really urge you to go see this film and learn about Anthony Fauci, learn about his history, because frankly, this man has been wrong about everything in his entire political and bureaucratic career, and he has killed people not only in the AIDS crisis, I absolutely agree, but his advice killed people in the COVID pandemic as well. Breaking Battlegrounds coming back in just a moment.
Welcome back to Breaking Battlegrounds. I'm your host, Chuck Warren, and my co-host, Sam Stone. Today with us, we have Jeff Hayes. He's an award-winning filmmaker and television producer, and he has come out with a new documentary called The Real Anthony Fauci. And, Jeff, you and I were talking earlier. You and I are not anti-vax people. We're vaccinated for, the things. We've had our children vaccinated for measles and mumps and those things and so forth. And so
you get your flu shot every year, right?
I mean, so we're not these, let's go down to Whole Foods and get some herbal remedies for this stuff type people, right? But knowing that about us, and Sam's the same way, what has caused you alarm about Anthony Fauci as you've made this documentary?
Well, it is shockingly, people don't know this, but Bobby Kennedy Jr. is not anti-vaccine. He opens every speech he makes with saying the phrase, "I'm not anti-vaccine. I am vaccinated. I had all my childhood vaccinations. My kids were all vaccinated. I am about vaccine safety and accountability. He opens every speech with that. And then when it's reported on, anti-vaxxer Bobby Kennedy. Because so anti-vax has become to me, if you have any question at all on vaccines, you're somehow anti-vaccine. And Chuck, as we were talking earlier, people ask me, well, are vaccines good or bad? And I'm like, okay, well, which vaccine are you talking about? That's like saying, are people good or bad? Is food good or bad? There's different safety profiles on every vaccine, but to ensure compliance, they've made it vaccines are, the earth is round, the sky is blue, the vaccines are safe and effective, the end. And that is the pitch. And this thing that came out with the mRNA vaccine, they had to change the definition of vaccine. It is it's a genetic experiment. It doesn't fit the previous definition of what even a vaccine is. And all of this was pushed to the forefront by Tony Fauci.
What are some things you have discovered about Anthony Fauci and the process of getting this vaccine out that you think our audience would not be aware of, and that's in the film?
Well, in the film, we cover, and by the way, people can see the film for 10 days for free at the realanthonyfaucimovie.com. So I want people to know they don't have to go pay for this. They don't have to drive anywhere. We may have to do some cat and mouse to keep it up, but it'll be online for free for 10 days at the realanthonyfaucimovie.com. What I was shocked with was the deep relationship between Bill Gates and Anthony Fauci. And when those two guys got together and really hit it off, it took off like a rocket. When you have Bill Gates, who remade himself as a philanthropist and, declared the decade of 2010 to 2020 the decade of vaccines, and put up $10 billion to make that happen from his foundation. Meanwhile, he's personally investing in the vaccine companies that are providing the vaccines that his philanthropy is causing to be mandated. Fortunes were made.
Why would someone like Bill Gates do that? He's already a billionaire. he can never spend it all. Why do you think? What do you think motivates him? Was it truly started as altruistic? I'm worried about this. We all go down these rabbit holes of interest and things we're worried about. Like Sam and I get really worried about the deficit, right?
I think certain people, you have certain preconceptions, and you want to. You want the public, quite frankly, to see you the way you see yourself. And I think Bill Gates sees himself as one of the leading geniuses of the world, and that people should follow his lead.
Would you buy that, Jeff? Is that how you view it?
I completely avoid trying to assign what somebody's thinking. And I'm just looking at the viewers will see when they see this film, we will show you what they did, and you can decide why you think they did it. The facts alone are sufficient to have outrage.
We're with Jeff Hayes. He has put out a new documentary called The Real Anthony Fauci. Where can they find that again online, Jeff, for free for the first 10 days?
Right, the realanthonyfaucimovie.com.
What made doing this documentary different from the others you have done?
Well, I jokingly call this one my career-ending film. When you see it at the end on the credits, half of the people that worked on the film asked to have their name redacted. This is such a topic. Like, we had YouTube on, one of our editors sent us a private clip on his private page, password protected, to show us some edits he had done on a 10-minute section of the film, and YouTube took that down for violating their policy. They have completely eliminated any right. This film is being suppressed before it was even finished. They can't be objecting to the content. Our website's been blacklisted. We're appealing all of those by 5 different services. They really don't want this information out. And this one, I had to think long and hard. Am I willing to stand in this arena next to Bobby Kennedy Jr. because I've seen the arrows he's taken.
Yeah, and you're no stranger to taking arrows. Your 2004 film Fahrenheit 9/11 really criticizing and contesting Michael Moore's Fahrenheit 9/11. You were right. In fact, Moore himself has come out, and I think it was about a year and a half or 2 years ago, and basically said you were, not in so many words, but did another film where he basically tore down all the premises that had brought him to fame in kind of the same way you did.
Yeah, and by the way, Chuck, I wish people knew the behind-the-scenes role that you played in us getting that film out there. That was absolutely critical and really directly responsible to the success of that film.
So what is I appreciate that.
Public thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. So what are the plans to distribute this? People can go on to therealanthonyfaucimovie.com. They can view it there free for 10 days. What is your distribution model going forward so as many people can see this as possible?
So right now we need, if people watch it, I'm going to ask them, on the landing page to please share this film. Literally, that's the only way. We've got a full-page ad that's running in USA Today on the 18th, and that's all of the media that we're on The Blaze, we're on the Epoch Times, but we had money to spend on media, and of course, I can't run any Facebook ads, no Google ads, so we're letting this go grassroots and letting people share it for free and see if we can really get the film out there.
Jeff,
people need to see it.
Jeff, I'm going to watch it first, but you probably don't know I'm policy director for Kerry Lake, who's running for governor here in Arizona. I'm going to get her to take a look at this film and see if we can't have her tweet this out, because that guarantees a few hundred thousand people.
That would be fantastic, Sam.
Newt Gingrich tweeted about it yesterday.
Oh, that's fantastic. So let's do a little personal moment here quickly. Tell people what is the process of putting a documentary like this together? I mean, how does it start from inception to the end? And tell people a little bit about it. I think people will find that process interesting.
Yeah, in this one, once I read the book, I've known Bobby for years. I called Bobby and asked him if he would let me make a documentary of it, and agreed. And so I agreed to personally finance it. And so we're talking about, a quite expensive project. Way too much of my savings is in this film, but it's just absolutely worth it. This was a little easier because the research was already done and it was meticulously researched. And so once we read the book again and pulled the themes out that we wanted to cover, we just had to contact and film the people that were quoted in that section of the book. And usually you have to talk people to being in a film. In this one, they were eager to tell the story, especially the scientists who've had their careers ruined by Anthony Fauci. And so this was a joy to film. Then Bobby flew in several times for all-day interviews here in my studio, and his voice is difficult. We've done a good job cleaning it up in the final, but he has that vocal disorder that's in his family, and so it was a lot of stress for him. But man, he was so good on camera. You'll see when you see the film.
How many people did you try to interview just said, look, I don't want to be on camera?
People that were in the book were the only people we contacted. We stayed within the parameters of the book, and we didn't have anybody that wouldn't agree to participate. We had a lot of people that wouldn't agree to work on the film, and like I said, people that worked on the film that asked their names to be redacted in the credits.
Have you lost friends making this?
Not to my face.
As most friendships are.
And so, yeah, we will see. Like, I've got a film. I had a film in the Toronto Film Festival a month ago. I've got a film submitted for Sundance. And even as I submitted it, I thought I probably should take my name off of this because it's doomed.
Have you always been a storyteller? I mean, since you were a young boy, have you always been a storyteller?
This was my dream. I am living my dream. I wanted to make movies. I was a stockbroker when I was in my 20s, and I told my friends, I'm going to make movies. And they're like, how are you going to do that? And I'm like, I don't know, but I see them. Somebody figured it out. And so I really am getting to live my dream.
See, I grew up telling stories too, but they're sort of the opposite of documentaries.
They're fictional. They're fictional stories. What do you find the most pleasing part of being a documentary filmmaker?
I get to talk to people that I wouldn't be able to reach. My wife has cancer, and I know I was able to call a Nobel Prize winner and ask for advice. I know people, because I've been able to film them to get in the door with them, that I wouldn't have met any other way in the world. And so the delightful Rolodex of friends and acquaintances that I've built through this is definitely the payoff.
How do you just your political opinion here, which not much of the documentary here, what do you feel about when you see these new Pfizer reports come out showing it wasn't a cure-all they thought, or politicians or corporations saying you have to be, have to have these vaccines in order to travel? Or what are your views on those?
Well, what happened was very clever. They were mandates that were enforced not by the government, but instead by corporations, where the government did things like the government can't violate our First Amendment rights. But, they did put pressure on Twitter to kick Alex Berenson off of Twitter. And the documentation is there. So all of a sudden you have corporations doing the bidding of a government of something that we would never vote for or would never be legal if the government did it directly. This is the first time I've seen corporations become the lapdog of government, and I'm seeing it, from Google, from Facebook, and you saw the threats from Elizabeth Warren to Facebook. Look, you either do this or we're going to do it for you. And so they fell in line, and we lost significant rights without the government doing it directly.
Yeah, it's unfortunate how much of modern communication is tied up by these giant internet titans, and they have made it very clear that on this issue and probably everything else going forward, they intend to be government lapdogs.
Yeah, I had a Vimeo account that I paid $80,000 a year just for storage, 13 terabytes of storage, and I got a notice that I had vaccine misinformation on my storage, and I had 3 days to eliminate it, or they were going to erase my account.
Good grief. Well, Jeff, before we go to break, we have to do a quick sponsor read here, so I want to thank you for joining us today. Folks, you can find this movie starting next Tuesday, the 18th, at therealanthonyfaucimovie.com. That's therealanthonyfaucimovie.com. We hope you go on there and join it. Also, folks, did you know over 44 million Americans owe more than $1.71 trillion in student debt? That is massively more than all the credit card debt in this country. You can go to yrefi.com. That's the letter Y, REFY.com, or call 888-819-9556. If you're not eligible for the government rebates, go on there, see if they can get you a better deal on your student loan. Breaking Battlegrounds will be back next week, but make sure you tune in for the podcast segment.
Welcome back to Breaking Battlegrounds with your host Chuck Warren and Sam Stone. We are honored to have with us Andrew Kerr. He was a former investigative reporter of Washington Examiner and just started this past week with the Washington Free Beacon. And Beacon, I mean, not bacon. Bacon does sound good right now, though.
Oh,
but Beacon,
Chuck,
Washington Free Bacon.
I'm hungry. Don't
Beacon.
Do this to me.
Okay. So, Andrew, you wrote a story on Senator Warnock in Georgia this week. And
it's a pretty astounding story.
It's a pretty astounding story, and what's amazing is he never seems to be hit for these personal failings. If it was Herschel Walker, it'd be all anybody would be talking about. So tell us a little bit about your story and what you've discovered in your investigative reporting.
Yes, thanks for having me on. So Raphael Warnock receives a $7,400 a month housing allowance from his church. He still works as a pastor as he serves in the Senate, and he gets this enormous housing benefit. Well, it turns out that the church that pays him this lucrative housing benefit through a very complicated structure of shell organizations and charities owns 99% of a low-income apartment building in downtown Atlanta that moved to evict residents during the pandemic. And these are residents that one of them was sued for $28.55 in unpaid rent. I went to the building last week, and I spoke to some of the people that were served these lawsuits, and one person told me that they were only a day late making their rent payment, and they were still served papers. I mean, we're talking, this is a very subsidized apartment. It's received over $15 million in taxpayer funding since 2005. And these people, they pay on average like $125, $150 a month in rent, if that. And yet, one day late, they're being served eviction notices. And so essentially the story is connecting this building with the church that's paying this lucrative housing benefit to a sitting United States senator. These eviction lawsuits were filed during the same time frame that Raphael Warnock was attacking his 2020 political opponents for not supporting COVID rent moratoriums.
Well, and these apartments aren't a bunch of college students, right? These are probably people in the black community. Is that fair to say?
Yes, the residents are. I don't have exact demographic makeup, but I can say that almost everybody that I saw in the building was African American, and it's a primarily older population. The building has received so much public funding, so it can function as a residence for mostly elderly.
This is subsidized low-income housing, probably under the LIHTC program or something like that.
Yeah, for the chronically homeless and people with mental disabilities. So and most people are pretty old there. So no, it's not college housing. It's people down on their luck. The people I talk to, they're good folks, just down on their luck. And they're kind of appalled that their rent is they're being sued for $120 in unpaid rent, but the fees that they were charged as well, over $300 in fees. So some of these people that just paid the fees that amounted to over 2 months worth of rent, for only being a few days late. The fact that it's owned by a church is just, it's still, I've been kind of enmeshed in this story for 2 weeks now, and it's still just it's galling that that's a thing that would happen.
I got to say that, there's been a lot of talk, obviously, about Herschel Walker being pro-life and then, getting a woman, presumably getting a woman pregnant and paying for an abortion. That was her choice, presumably. That was his choice. They didn't hurt people who weren't inside that relationship. What Raphael Warnock is doing here is real harm to citizens who are living on the edge. I mean, this is awful.
Look, Andrew, we're with Andrew Kerr. He is an investigative reporter at the Washington Free Beacon. Andrew, do you feel does the senator know about this? Or is there any way he does not know about this?
Well, he certainly knows about it now. The arrangement here is that the church has a charity that it fully controls, and then that charity owns 99% of the building through a shell corporation. And the arrangement is that the 1% owner is a company called Columbia Residential, and they manage the day-to-day operations of the building, Columbia Residential. So, the residents I talked to had no idea that Ebenezer had any sort of ownership in the building at all. They also had no idea that the building just got a $5 million grant from Georgia just 2 months ago. It's possible that Warnock just didn't know about it. But at the same time, when they're applying for these public funds, I was able to pull the grant document. You have a responsibility. I mean, you're receiving all this public funding. You're the 99% building owner. If you didn't know about it, how could you let this happen? Why haven't you taken a more active role to ensure that you're the steward of these funds? And it's a good mission to maintain a building like this. And that's another aspect of this. It's so weird to me that Ebenezer Baptist Church made no mention whatsoever publicly that they own this building. It was actually really hard to piece together that they're tied to this building. And that's just why wouldn't they want to advertise that and shout it from the rooftops that, hey, look at this great thing we're doing for our community? Yesterday, Warnock's campaign finally gave a response, and essentially he said that this is a despicable attack on the spiritual home of Martin Luther King Jr., but he didn't. But he did, and that's a quote. But he didn't dispute any of the facts that we've been reporting at the Free Beacon. So I think that's quite telling, and it also appears that he's trying to use the memory of Martin Luther King Jr. to be a shield, for this type of conduct.
What kind of home does $7,400 a month buy in Atlanta?
I want to get this clear, Andrew. So is he still receiving the $7,417 a month housing allowance?
He almost certainly is. So we know about that because he reported receiving salary and benefits from the church in his 2021 financial disclosure. And the Atlanta Journal-Constitution then figured out that a lot of that was, this $7,400 a month housing allowance. So, we only know that for sure through December of last year, but almost certainly he's still receiving it.
And he's still a senior pastor, correct?
Yes, he's still he collects his salary from the church. He still preaches there. He still has an active role.
Okay, so let me ask this: Congress can only earn outside income of $29,595 per member. How does this not break that law? I mean, 7,000 times 12 is above 29,000, even with my limited liberal arts degree. How does that not break the law?
So he reported receiving around $130,000 total in salary and benefits from the church last year. It's an arrangement that was approved by the Senate Ethics Committee. The $7,000 month housing allowance is considered a benefit. It's a tax-free benefit. So that's how he's able to kind of sidestep that outside income limitation. So presumably he's just using that housing allowance and just using it to fully fund his $1 million home in Atlanta.
Doesn't that baffle your mind that he's allowed to get? I mean, look, we're having this, it's sort of percolating out there, and I agree with Elizabeth Warren on this, which I don't agree with her much on, that we need to stop members from trading stock as their members. Stuff needs to go in blind trust, right? I don't see how this is much different. I mean, this is weird.
It's very weird, and this is a church that's it's getting public funding. I'm mentioning this $5 million grant that they just was approved for them from the state of Georgia in August. That's leftover COVID-19 funds, and so Warnock is voting on some of those initiatives, and then this entity, this church that's paying him all this money and sidestepping outside income limitations through kind of like a loophole. Yeah, I mean it's all very odd. Warnock is not struggling for cash. I mean the Senate salary is $174,000. I mean that's plenty, and so that he would even accept that. And it's worth noting that the combined value of the 12 eviction lawsuits that were filed against residents of this building, the total sum of back rent sought by all those lawsuits adds up to $4,900. So all of these lawsuits could have been covered with just one of Warnock's housing benefit checks from his church, and he'd still have over $2,000 left over. So it's just the fact that he's receiving that benefit, and then there's also these lawsuits for people being one day late rent, not even $100 behind rent. It's just wild.
Sam, how much does it cost at the food shelters here in Phoenix to feed someone daily?
About $3.50.
Can you imagine if that money that they're giving him for a housing allowance had gone, for the purpose of a church to help the underserved, right? The homeless,
look,
impoverished.
What you're basically saying is that the money they're giving him each month could offset the rent these people are paying, which would make a huge difference in their lives, that extra $100 or $125. I mean, that's what you're talking about. And this church is taking in contributions from the state. This strikes me, and I've been in local government for a long time now, this strikes me as one of those insider backroom deals that if the public really understood what was going on, they'd be outraged.
Yeah, so it's worth mentioning that just a few hours ago we put out a story that the Georgia Secretary of State's Securities and Charities Division, they sent a letter to this charity that is controlled by Warnock's church, that is part of this ownership connected to the building. They sent that charity a letter asking them why you've been operating as a charity in the state. You've raised millions of dollars, and yet you're not registered as a charity with us. So why is this? And so essentially they've launched an investigation, to kind of get to the bottom of why this entity is called the Ebenezer Building Foundation, which identifies Warnock as its principal officer and has all of its it delegates all management to the church. Why aren't they registered in the state of Georgia as a charity? It's possible that there could be an exemption that allows them to operate without being registered, but that's the state of Georgia is taking this pretty seriously. It appears. So it's some good impact just a few days after getting our first story out on this on Tuesday.
Well, this is some fantastic reporting. This also is another reason of a million examples why people don't trust institutions and churches and things anymore. This is just greed at its worst example.
Yeah, absolutely.
Andrew Kerr, we're going to post your article on our social media sites. Everybody, we recommend you go to the Washington Free Beacon today. Look up the article. They treat me like a piece of S. Ralph Warnock's church pays for his home. It's also trying to evict poor from theirs. Andrew, thank you for coming on our show, and we'll hope you join us again soon, real quick.
Thanks, Sam and Chuck.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
I don't even know what to say about that.
Look,
to me, look, black and white, it clearly breaks the law of what you can bring in outside income.
Here's the thing, Chuck. Yes, it does absolutely do that. But leaving aside the issues of Warnock himself, who is dirty in this, this is something I have seen around municipal government. We have it here going on in Phoenix. We have it going on in every city in the country, every major city in the country, most of the minor cities in the country, pretty much every county in the country. These deals are happening that are basically scams. And you have these charities who exist primarily to enrich and support their leadership, who deliver a limited or poor level of service, and who are living off the public dole. And this is over and over and over in every city across this country. It is one of the major funders and supporters of the Democratic Party, is these monies that are going to charities that are barely charities by any name. It is gross.
It's unbelievable. I want to wrap up our podcast here today. We have things to do, but I want to go over quickly 3 polls the past month that have been done on the generic congressional ballot. And this is done by Rasmussen. So on September 29th, Republicans were at 45%, Democrats at 44%, 1% advantage. October 6th, Republicans 47%, Democrats 44%. That's 3%. October 13th, Republicans 48%, Democrats 41%, plus 7%. Sam, what are you seeing on the trail when you talk to people? We did a focus group. Kyla and I did a focus group on Sunday night. We both left stunned. We asked people about their economic condition. Kylie, would you say 20% said they'd had a relative basically moved in with them recently because they couldn't do rent?
Yep.
They can't pay rent. So
Yep.
20% of these people, we had a room of about 25 people, 26. 20% of those people said they had to have a relative move into their home because they can't afford rent. They were talking about all the things they are giving up. They're not going to movies anymore. They're not eating out anymore. I think it comes to a point they start cutting out other necessities in life because inflation is taking such a toll on them. We were stunned just how bad it was. The relative thing stuck out with me. It's one thing to say, look, I'm not going to movies anymore, right? And there's no good movies anyway, but there's no reason to go to a movie anymore. The relative thing, when I talked to some people we work with afterwards, it really stood out to us. I mean, when you start doing that, I mean, you're running out of options.
And there's going to be a lot more of that because this inflation, Biden's already lining up to try to blame it on Republicans after they lose the House and Senate. He's already trying to sell that message. And the fact is this isn't going away because Democrats have continued printing money. His Inflation Fighting Act, or whatever the misnamed garbage is, will literally add inflation, and all the printing of the money for that hasn't been done yet.
No.
So, I mean, look, everything that this administration is doing is hurting people, period.
Well, there was a study out today that $1 million in a retirement account just 2 years ago is worth about $120,000 less when adjusted for inflation. And now with that financial backdrop, a quarter of Americans say that they are expecting to delay their retirement due to rising consumer costs.
It's down by $120,000 from inflation, but the stock market is down basically 50%.
Well, that's why people need to vote invest in things like Why Refi.
Yeah, we folks, we do have to apologize to our sponsor because we forgot to read. I kind of
WhyRefi.com or call 855-316-3087 so you can invest your money in something that's keeping up with inflation and performing a little bit better so far. We'll
Right.
see.
Yeah, consumer numbers just came out and they said spending's flat, but that's a lie. What it means is people are buying less, but
because
spending the same
everything's
amount.
more expensive.
Yeah.
It's the Wall Street Journal. The Wall Street Journal had a great piece on that today, saying yes, the money's there, but they're paying more for less. So it's really not what people think it is.
We did a press conference with Carrie the other day at a grocery store because she announced that Carrie Lake wants to eliminate taxes on groceries and rent in Arizona, and the store we did it at, a little local Hispanic market, put out carts with what you could buy in 2020 and what you could buy today for the same money. And it was it was literally double the amount of stuff in that cart in 2020 that you can buy today.
Amazing. Well, folks, thank you for joining us. We will be back next week. Coming up on the future shows, we have Senator Wicker from Mississippi, Congressman Drew Ferguson, who's the whip in the House, and other guests, including Blake Masters. So stay tuned with us this month for all your election coverage and news on public policy.
We're even going to try to get Carrie Lake back on.
Try to get her back on, folks. Have a great weekend and week.
Running for office? You need a campaign website. Introducing the web address of the democratic process, .vote. So how do you purchase your .vote website? Visit www.yourname.vote. Type your website name, example www.johnsmith.vote. It's available. Add your web address to your cart and check out. Once checked out and have received confirmation, you may begin to create and utilize your website to connect and engage voters. To learn more, visit get.vote. Happy campaigning!